much. This is an amazing opportunity. We are so thrilled.
Oh,
Yes,
it's great.
thank you very much.
It's
We're
great.
glad you're here. We're really glad you're here.
Same here. Same here.
It's an honor and a dream. Yeah.
Sam,
Thank you very much.
can I just say sorry on tech that it's quite difficult sometimes to hear the sort of feedback from you three guys talking sort of in here.
I can turn the speakers up for
yeah, if it would be possible, because I'm just finding it quite difficult to hear sort of round the corner to the speaker.
well, you just tell them the live stream is on YouTube now.
Okay, the live stream is on YouTube now, apparently, guys. Hello. I'm okay. How's things?
You share a name with my laptop.
Is that right? Great. That's very distinguished. I like the dog. I think that's probably Ed. He's got he's got higher tech skills. We can send you them if you haven't got them. I think.
It's just very nice use of our brands.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah.
But you might want to, if one of them's got access to the COP26 and be on LinkedIn, you might put that live link onto LinkedIn.
I think Ed's doing that.
Yeah, so then that your audience might suddenly start, signing in because they know it's happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're following this, we're just waiting to get started, and I think they're just waiting to go bring some students in to join us here at Strath Union.
Is there other speakers on at the moment?
No, there's others sort of online. Yeah, so we're trying to mix up Muggins here in Glasgow and various other people in Nigeria and Mexico and London and things.
Good fun with the cat and the dog.
Hi, if you're waiting, we're just waiting for them to get going here at Strath Union, and we'll be on shortly and talking about beyond COP26. Hello. Hi, Ruth. Yeah. I met some of you guys yesterday. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great. What time would you like to get it started, Vin? Okay. Hi, welcome. Okay. Yeah, let's make a start. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. My name is William Wilson. I'm from a little outfit called COP26 and Beyond. And we're here at Strath Union today with After the Pandemic to talk about the issue of what happens beyond COP26. What happens next after this big conference is over? I'm going to take this mask off for a bit. How can we keep the momentum going after Glasgow? I try that, doesn't work. Can I have the next slide, please? A new battery. There we go. There we go. Thanks very much. So I'm William Wilson, the one on the left. I hope that we have Sam Wilson joining us from London, and Edward Wilson is not able to join us from Connecticut in the USA. And it's a good point at which to say a big thank you to them for the enormous efforts and the talents that they've shown on all the events and activities that we've taken so far this year. We wouldn't be anywhere near COP26 without their efforts. So thank you, guys. Also joining us, I hope, are Samuel Chijioke Okori from the POP movement, the Protect Our Planet movement that was set up by the late, great R.K. Pachauri, who was head of the IPCC. Samuel is an indefatigable young climate activist from Nigeria who campaigns on both local and global issues. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. Also, I hope joining us from Mexico, Kevin Morales Munsterman and Ivan Ramon, also from the POP movement, and from their own outfit, which they have set up called Resilience 2020. Samuel, are you there? Samuel Okori, are you online with us today?
Yes, yes. You can hear me, right?
Yes, Samuel, could you just sort of introduce yourself a little bit and just tell us what, you know, in a word or two, what you're hoping for at COP and beyond COP?
Okay, so my hope in COP26 is climatepreneurship, financing climatepreneurship, you know, and beyond COP is more of transition approach towards mitigating climate change impacts. Because we keep talking about adaptation, we keep talking about mitigation, we even keep talking about resilience, but we are not talking about transition at all. So my hope is transition and financing of climatepreneurship. By climatepreneurship, I mean climate change solutions that tackles climate change impacts through young global activities that are coming up with a whole lot of innovations to transition into zero carbon, which is the Paris Agreement and memorandum.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Transition and some finance to support the transition is obviously a big feature of the negotiations going on down the road. And could we also just bring in Kevin Morales-Munsterman and Ivan Ramon? If you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and also what you're hoping for from COP26 and after COP26, and also about Resilience 2020. Kevin, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, my name is Kevin Morales-Munsterman. I'm from Mexico, as you already said. I'm co-founder of a social and sports project in Mexico called Academia Borussia, which is supported by a German team, Borussia Dortmund. And I'm also co-founder with Ivan Ransom from an environmental project called Resilience 2020. We started on 2020. And well, what we do is we implement installing eco-technologies on homes so that each household save money. And we use their products and integrate them into a circular economy model. Hopefully, we will be on the rest of the world eventually. In 2023 is one of our targets. So hopefully see you soon in your home. Go ahead, Ivan. Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm expecting from COP26 is, as Samuel said, finance. There has been released some funds, but the thing is that normally that funds doesn't actually get to the target. So a really good procedure so that the funding get to sponsor projects, environmental projects, and not only corporate initiatives that normally they don't have a really good environmental impact. And well, I would like to see a lot of discussions of some ideas, some concepts that sometimes they're not actually that environmental, but they're really right now getting into everyone's mind. And well, I hope it's not as a green revolution as we had it before.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And thank you also to, well, both Glasgow and people in Glasgow for putting up with this huge invasion of all us strangers from outside, and also particularly to the Strath Uni for this fantastic venue, and to After the Pandemic, who are doing this incredible work here for this fortnight with the most amazing sort of bunch of activities. And the energy and creativity that's going on down here has to be sort of experienced to be believed. So if I go on with some of the things we've been...
Sorry to interrupt. Can we just let Ivan introduce himself?
Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought, yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah, Ivan.
Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Ivan Ransom. And well, it will be great to be in Glasgow, actually, such a beautiful, beautiful city. So yeah, as Kevin just said, I'm co-founder with him of the Resilience 2020 project. Also a member of the POP movement, and what I expect, or what I would like to see more at the COP is a little bit of a change, let's say, in the focus in order to promote and support even more programs that are related to biodiversity and also for original peoples communities. This is really important because they have been taking care of our planet and of other species for millennia, and yet they are some of the most threatened people in the world, some of the most vulnerable also to climate change. So I think it will be great to have like more support for them, and also to start like changing the way like investments are usually done, and to promote impact investing. So that will be for my part. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. And I apologize for the typo, which is mine. It is Ivan Ranson. So just to give you an idea, it's just not working, I don't think. If you could have the next slide. Some of the things we've been doing this year. We have a blog, guides, social media, and a number of events. If you're involved in the work at the COP, do have a look at our Paris Agreement on climate change. It's a short guide. It's in English and Spanish and Italian, and it's tried to make it sort of decipherable for people to just get on and use the different articles in it. We've had a number of events and activities. Oops. So this is what we've been doing this week. We endorsed a endorsing signatory of a climate declaration, a COP26 joint statement of international youth organizations, largely young engineers, but not entirely, also Youngo. Have a look at that. That's a pretty impressive thing put together by people like Engineers Without Borders and World Engineering Organizations. We've been speaking last Saturday to the fringe event at the COP26. I was speaking with great help from Anne Johnston to Net Zero Scotland community, having hashed up the tech, but I got in eventually. We've published a blog to coincide with the first day of COP from Bhagat Pokhrel, who's a young activist from Mock COP, guy from Bhutan, and just saying COP26 as seen from Bhutan, where the big issue is, despite there being a carbon negative country, glacial melt and flooding from the glaciers, which has huge implications, because once the water is melted in the glaciers, how are the people downstream going to get their water? So that's just a flavor of what we've been doing. And now perhaps I could just hand over to Sam just to set the scene for us and a quick recap about what happens after this COP.
Thanks very much, William. Can I just check, can everyone hear me both in the virtual world and in the real world?
Yes,
fantastic.
we can.
Okay, that's great. Well, just quickly, just to reiterate, thank you so much to Kevin, Ivan, and Samuel for joining us today, and huge thanks to After the Pandemic and the University of Strathclyde for hosting us. It's a real pleasure to have at least one of our representatives at COP26 and engaging with the brilliant variety of things that are going on there. So it's a real pleasure to be there. What I thought I'd just do quickly is just to recap what happens immediately next. So we'll have a longer discussion about the longer term issues that will remain pertinent after the sort of party fades from COP26 and we look to the years ahead. But let's just have a think about what a really quick recap we'll all be familiar with now, but what the main goals have been going into this and what will happen immediately next. So as you'll all recall, COP26 sets out to start implementing the Paris Agreement. That's what we're really here to do. And the Paris Agreement, as you all know, was 195 countries agreeing to keep global temperatures well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels and pursuing efforts to limit heating to 1.5 degrees C. And you've heard a lot of coverage around COP26 this year, reciting this phrase, keep 1.5 alive. And I think holding that as one really strong measure of what success might look like is valuable. But we won't come out of COP26 with a big treaty like we did in Paris. What instead we will leave with is lots of individual countries contributing their revised nationally determined contributions to reach these Paris goals. And those current policies and NDCs, quite frankly, aren't good enough. They're leading to potentially about 2.7 degrees of warming. So 1.5 is certainly not alive at that point, which would be a catastrophe for our planet. And I'm sure by now we're all familiar with the projections of what the difference between 1.5, 2 degrees, or even 3 degrees of warming really look like. And there's a vast difference, and it really matters. So if you could just go on to the next slide, let's just have a think about what success might really mean at COP. And I've mentioned keeping 1.5 alive. That's one goal. But for Patricia Espinosa, who's the executive secretary of the UNFCCC, she really highlights these sort of 4 key goals that are worth thinking about. That the promises, first of all, that the promises made to developing countries are kept. And there's been a lot of talk about the 100 billion a year in climate finance that's been promised but not met. Those promises need to be kept. Secondly, as I mentioned, the Paris Agreement is really a promise. But now governments really need to start delivering on the promise. So she mentions the need to really start implementing the Paris Agreement and putting real concrete actions on the ground. She also mentions the need to lower emissions, but also raise climate ambition. But as well as I think Ivan, you mentioned, as well as those measures also need to adapt and build resilience in the system to the impacts of climate change that are already here. And finally, she mentions the importance of not leaving a voice or solution behind. And really this audience and the whole COP process is testament to the variety of viewpoints of ways to get to net zero and to reduce our impact on the planet. If I could just have the next slide. So at this point, just very quickly, let's just recap. Are we really on track? And the short answer is no. This is a sort of complex graph, but there's 2 things that you really need to know about it. For each country, these represent the G20 nations here, not all countries, but for each country here, there's a column. And the orange dash at the top represents their nationally determined contribution as it stands. And the green dash below that represents where they should be if they're going to achieve and keep 1.5 alive. So what we see is this vast gap, even in ambition, between how ambitious they are in orange and how ambitious their NDCs are, and where they should be to keep 1.5 alive. But that's only part of the problem. Even if the ambition were to come down, as it is as we move and look at sort of Europe or maybe the UK on the right-hand side, are the policies in place to implement it? And in many cases, there aren't. So even as we're thinking what's next after COP26, what do I do as a young climate activist going into the next stages? Well, there's a lot to do here, right? There's a lot still to do to bring that ambition down and to put in the policies to make them happen. So just quickly, just to finish off, next slide, please. After COP26, what should we aim for? Well, here's a guy who's talked to us a lot this year. We really valued Piers Forster, who's a lead author of the IPCC. And he mentions there's good news. We've got to stay optimistic about the good news that we can stop many of these extremes getting worse. But the bad news, be really aware of the fact that these extreme weather events will keep happening unless we take really strong action. So there's both a positive and a negative message there. And the next slide, please. And finally, what can you do? So when the party's over, when we all go home from COP26, it will still be important to stay engaged. It will still be important to stay positive and really led by the science and the evidence. It will remain important to be organized and collaborate with as many people as you can. And more specifically, as each country will be submitting all of these ambitious goals, hold them to account for it. Look up what your country's promised. Look up your NDC and your national inventory of man-made emissions and ask those people who need to be asked, is it good enough? Is the ambition good enough? Do governments have an implementation plan to actually make it happen? And as a civil society, what can we do to really enforce them to stick to it? Finally, let's keep this momentum going. COP26 has gathered a huge amount of momentum. Let's keep it going at the Convention on Biological Diversity, in future IPCC reports, and at the global stocktake of emissions in 2023. And I will pause to take a breath there and allow Kevin, Ivan, and Samuel to come in, and back to you, William.
Thank you very much indeed, Samuel. While you're gathering your breath and the others are getting ready, let's just mention the things along the bottom of that slide, the things coming up that we know about. In May 2022, the Convention on Biological Diversity, we're told by the IPBES that 1 million species are at risk of extinction at the moment. In September 2021, the US Fish and Wildlife Service confirmed that the ivory-billed woodpecker, it was an iconic bird that was the favorite of the illustrator Audubon, was finally extinct. So that is one of the focuses that we're going to have, as I think Ivan mentioned, on biodiversity and the protection of biodiversity, and integrating biodiversity with what are addressing climate change. There's going to be more reports next year from the IPCC. They're going to bring out further reports on mitigation, on impacts, adaptation, vulnerability, and the synthesis report on climate change. Next year, there will also be, I think, a COP27. It's almost too much to think about, but I can tell you that some young people that I was talking to yesterday, they're already sharpening their pencils and getting their plans in place and working out what they're going to do and what positions they're going to take at COP27. And in 2023, a very important part of the Paris Agreement, a global stocktake of emissions, which will be an important opportunity, I think, really to put individual countries' contributions or lack of them under the microscope and say, really, how are we getting on and who is doing what? So just pausing there and taking stock. Samuel, could you come in and say how you're going to try and keep the momentum going? You're doing great work on both the sort of global level and the local level. Tell us a bit about that and how you're going to sort of find the energy to stay engaged in these issues and keep going. Samuel Okori?
Okay, so thank you so much. Can you hear me?
It's a little unclear. Could you hold it a little bit closer to you, just to be a bit louder?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there has been a whole lot of things going on in the world currently, and then is no doubt that climate change is on us and it's telling everywhere. Look at our lands. In fact, in Nigeria currently, there has been unpredictable rainfall. There has been land degradation, scarcity of food. There has been increase in cost, and in fact, it's really much high temperature. Okay, plastic pollutions. Like from my own end, I think in Nigeria, I have been able to do a whole lot of things in terms of engaging with stakeholders from high to the bottom, and then also mobilizing youth and also training youth as well in regards to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and also a transition approach as well in case they cannot be able to tackle it, or in case they are able to tackle it and they just want to switch entirely. Because my major aim, apart from the mitigation and then adaptation, my major aim is also looking at transition phase, because not everybody can actually transit from carbon and from climate change to something else. Let's say companies and industries that are major polluters of carbon emission. Okay, so how do they transit to something else? How do they totally bring down their business to something that is entirely different? Okay, so that is what my major aim has been all about. And we have been able to educate youth and students in that regard and a whole lot of innovation. Now, coming down to COP26, and then looking at what our leaders have been saying so far, like their speech are really motivational, I have to say. It's really inspirational. So when you see high-profile speech, okay, and you see speech that calls for immediate action, but I just have to pause to listen to those speech again and again and again, because I know this is not the first time of hearing those words. This is not the first time of those speech coming out. In fact, this is not the first time of having high-spirited motivational talks that will actually make someone leave whatever he or she is doing to listen to it over and over again. But
Okay.
what after the speech, what next? Okay, we don't want talk, and it ends under the carpet, under the bed. We want, as you're talking, you're giving us practical steps you are taking in your country to say, fine, this is what you are doing. India said they are going to stop emission. They are going to zero net and carbon by 2060, by 2070. Nigeria by 2060, and other countries. But my major question to this country is, how can you be able to measure your carbon emission currently? And what step are you even taking that will make us know that, okay, by 2070, or at most by 2050, there should be over 50% drop of carbon emission in your country?
Yeah.
So we really need to get to practical. Until we see the practical approach they are doing, then all I have to say is most of these things are talk and talk and talk. For me, I would like to be in COP26 to just express myself, but I have a whole lot of engagement here in Nigeria. Okay, so for our leaders and for everyone out there, even the youth, my interest as well to the youth is, do not get entangled with the leaders you are seeing out there. Do not get entangled with the high profile. Do not get entangled with them, snapping pictures with them, because most of these things makes us forget why we are actually there. So when we go there, we just snap pictures, we eat good food, and we forget the real deal why we are there. But they should also hook them take them to give them the pressure that we are feeling these things and we need results. We don't want to talk. People have been talking. Like President has been talking. Antonio has been talking. Like leaders have been talking. Okay, if you even go to world press right now, you see talk, promises, and all that. We don't want those promises anymore. We want to see practical action. Thank you.
I think we've got the point, and I don't think you're the only person who is saying an end to talk. And I'm standing here in Glasgow, where I'm surrounded by banners saying "Get on with it." Which is very much a concentration on the mind and very much a summary of what you're saying, I think there, Samuel. So Kevin and Ivan, would you like to come in and comment on what steps you're going to take and what plans you've got to try and stay engaged with this issue and to try and keep your country's contribution under the microscope? Would you like to start off, Kevin?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all,
can you speak up a little bit, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes. First of all, I would like to say that I'm really glad to see Rooster trying to participate when Samuel was talking, because here in where I live is in Mexico City. I only hear cars. It was close. I actually got the chance to see and hear some wildlife animal again. I thought in that moment that we were going to change. Probably we did. Some people
maybe knocking against the microphone there. Just a little way. That's all right. That's better.
Probably some did, and they have the compost and homes. But the thing is that reality and the stress of the situation that we're living, it changed everyone, and we are back again on doing the same things again. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is obviously trying to make some projects such as Resilience 2020 in order to help people change their way of life, in order to make a really big environmental positive impact, while they also earn money. So the situation, the stress, they allow them to change. But also trying to press governors to actually implement the actions they said that they were going to do during the Paris Agreement and now during COP26. As someone said, everyone is talking and talking and talking. But the thing is, even during the World Leaders Summit, there were some discrepancies, such as the one the President Kenyatta said that they're using the 100 million US dollars that were supposed to release to everyone as some kind of the funds, but some money that was supposed to be released is actually taken into account from previous projects. So actually the money then it is not being released. And also if I would like to have that it happens, as Ivan said, that if it's released, it goes to impact investing projects so that they actually see an impactful meaning in the world from social and environmental social and environmental projects. So I would like to pressure governments to actually do that, and well, continue with the projects, environmental project we are right now running.
Thank you very much indeed. And Ivan, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I think it's really important what Samuel said about acting. I have been following his work, and he's actually doing so much for his community. So I think what we need more is leaderships like that in all the world, and especially speaking about Mexico. And what am I going to do about this is, well, as Kevin said, to keep with our project, Resilience 2020, in order to benefit the people and the environment. And also, I'm developing another project, which is about helping indigenous communities or original peoples communities, and also the biodiversity. What we are trying to do is to reforest the areas, specifically, or well, starting with the Lacandonian jungle, which is the hotspot of biodiversity in Mexico. So this project is going to start in there, and it's going to look forward to reforest and reverse the deforestation in the area to protect the original peoples in there, and also the biodiversity. And this is like the first step that we want to take. Also, something really important is to be organized, as you were saying in the slides. It's to join efforts and to not just like act individually. We can do more if we are together. So this is one invitation for people to join to different movements, to take action and to be leaders in their area, in their communities. Right now, this is a really important moment in which we can do that. Before, the funds or the government interests were not aligned at all with these matters. But now that everyone in the world has a focus, and it's trying to do something, or at least committing to do that internationally, this is the moment when we can do more. So my invitation, well, that's what I'm going to do, and my invitation for the audience is to do the same as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Samuel and Ivan and Kevin particularly. And despite all the sort of technical difficulties, particularly with anyone like me involved, I really appreciate being able to bring in a perspective from places like that to this room in Glasgow is a real privilege. And thank you to After the Pandemic for making it possible. So now I'm just going to rattle on and just tell you a bit about some of the topics we've been looking at in COP26 and beyond this year, and what the issues are. And starting with using the law to fix the climate, just one slice of how you address it. Not that the law is particularly important, but it's one way of delivering change. And one of the things we got involved with quite early on was the mock COP that was run last November by youth groups from 142 countries. 330 young people came together when COP was postponed and said they were going to run their own. Ran a incredible two-week sort of debating chamber, and produced at the end of it the mock COP treaty, which you'll see them there producing, and which they have continued throughout the year to put to good use. Indeed, Samuel, who you just heard, and Kilo Chendu from Nigeria took that treaty to a meeting with the Nigerian minister and helped get parts of that treaty that the young people had debated written into the Nigerian climate change bill, which to me, as someone who tries to bring about legal change sometimes, is just an extraordinary achievement. And so that's one of the things that we witnessed, is the actual impact that young people's actions can have when they got so organized that they brought Alok Sharma, the president of the current COP, to address them at their opening ceremony at the mock COP, and then handed over the treaty to the high-level champions at the end of it. One of the things, so whilst one of the themes that of our work is getting people more widely involved in making laws, it's not some mystery, it's something that we're trying to encourage young people and everyone generally to get more involved in it. The other theme is trying to make sure that the laws are enforced. And this is one reason why the Paris Agreement is not working fully at the moment. If the Paris Agreement was enough on its own, emissions might be going down by now. But in fact, as this Mauna Loa, the Keeling curve shows, they're going up relentlessly. This graph shows CO2 at the highest levels in human history. And we basically need policies to turn it upside down, because the last time that CO2 levels were at this level in our atmosphere was 4 million years ago, when sea levels were 78 feet higher. So if you think of COP26 in terms of what laws may be needed to make the results of it work, ultimately you have to bring it down from these high level issues about what we're going to do about 1.5 degrees, and you'll have to have separate laws on things like net zero, on nationally determined contributions, on what a country's plans will be for 2030, on the energy transition, on transport, home heating, cooling, insulation, and so on and so forth. In each case, what you need is clear laws, effective, independent, well-resourced enforcement, clear aims, visible targets, good communication, and public support. So it is an issue for everyone. And maybe you also need legal challenges for failures to enforce. And I think the message for people who are so able at dealing with climate issues like yourselves is this gives you plenty of opportunities to influence and improve the laws in your own countries, because each of those is another opportunity as well as a problem. But it does take persistence. And just to give you one example, the UK Environment Bill is, in my view, still delivering inadequate governance, inadequate treatment of environmental principles, targets, less independent enforcement against a backdrop, if you look at the practical enforcement of environmental laws, of 0% compliance of rivers with chemical standards in England, 84% non-compliance with ecological standards, 63% of waste collection bodies outside the system of statutory registration and therefore operating illegally, and air quality, as in many countries, well below the new and revised WHO standards. So we have a lot to do in our own countries, and we have a lot to do at the practical local level. I was sitting here yesterday watching Niamh MacDonald talking about her campaign to oppose an incinerator being sited in her own community in Consett. And as she was talking very articulately about all the steps she'd taken, I was thinking really all activity comes down to local activity in the end. You know, you can campaign at the high level and the global level, but in the end, you've got to decide what you're prepared to do about your own community. And in a way, it's the same with laws. You know, you have to do it at both levels of trying to influence what may be going on in the blue zone down the road, but also being prepared to say, well, what am I going to do about local laws and air pollution in Glasgow or whatever it is? So another aspect of what we've been doing is to consider the energy transition. Here I'm going into Ed Wilson's slides, and I'll probably fall flat on my face on trying to explain the technical aspects of it. But the energy transition, as you know, is really about the transition from fossil fuels to generate energy to the use of lower carbon forms of generation. And energy is responsible for about 73% of the total emissions. So it's a really big one to win and of huge significance. Huge changes are required to how we generate electricity, heat our homes, power transport systems, and heavy industries. And the experts who've come along to the events that we've had in the course of the year have explained to us that it really represents a fundamental change to the entire way that we run our economies. There are some successes. It's not all doom and gloom. There is broad acceptance of the need for net zero. It's just a question of how fast we're prepared to go to get there. And Ed says in this slide that what it really represents is a shift from the do we need to do this to how fast are we prepared to go. And decarbonization in the power grid can lead to significant lower emissions, as happened in the UK when we moved away from coal. There are some other successes, the uptake and reduction in the cost of renewable energy. I won't even try and interpret the slide on the end, but that as you know, the costs of solar and offshore wind in particular have come right down, and it's making a big difference. And coal economically is in trouble. And we've seen this week more signatories to the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and big support being given to South Africa to address its almost 80% reliance on coal generation there. But big standouts, particularly in China, the 1,082 coal-fired power stations and more on the way, and in India, where there's also almost an 80% reliance on coal. There's a long way to go, but some strides are being made. So the energy transition still faces significant challenges, big reliance on fossil fuels, as represented by those black stripes there. That is the reliance on coal, and the gray is gas and oil. Emissions are still rising, and in a way that's the sort of that's the sanity check to all this. You just look at the emissions on the Keeling curve and see where they've got to. And I think in David Attenborough's film, they kept on putting up the figure 414 parts per million, which is even more than it was. And the absolutely imperative need to make a just transition from looking after the communities that are presently invested in fossil fuel production and exploration, and making sure that we don't leave them behind, as perhaps we have done in the past. And Anne Johnston has spoken about this, I know, the importance of really taking this seriously, not making the mistakes we've made in the past about leaving coal mining communities on their own to struggle with the adjustment that we heard about even yesterday at Concit from steelmaking, the adjustment to new technologies. And that's a big issue, and we've heard about it in our events in Canada. It's a big issue in South Africa, where one of the speakers at one of our events said that coal mining communities just fear the energy transition because they just regard it as yet one more way of offering them unemployment. We've got to try and address that and address it effectively. But there are also opportunities, such as new frontiers in renewable energy, floating wind, tidal power, battery storage, the big debates about the role of hydrogen and energy storage technology. I see that marine turbine at the top right, and I was seeing a video of that demonstrated at the COP26 Green Zone yesterday. Dr. Andrew Garrod, great engineer and wind farm expert who addressed one of our events, said that in the future, his view was that integration and storage were going to be at the front edge of new technology taking over. So that's just some of the consideration that we've given to the energy transition. And I'll hand over to Sam Wilson to talk about some of the implications of that for work and education and a just transition. Sam.
Thanks very much indeed. So the story so far, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that needs to be done. We need to crack on with an energy transition that gets us to net zero. What does that mean for the area that I'm really passionate about, which is education and jobs and the way people change their skills? And that's what I'm just going to highlight a little bit here. So the first thing to really think about is that this will affect all jobs. The transition, decarbonisation will affect your job, not just if you're in the very sort of niche area of renewable energy technologies. But as we've heard from some of the speakers today, from Kevin, Ivan, Samuel, all working in quite different areas, this effort to get to net zero will affect everyone. If you're an artist, if you're a poet, if you're a musician, you're going to have to come to terms with some of the emotional effects or the changes in society and communicate that as an artist. If you're a journalist, there's an increasing responsibility to conscientiously depict climate change in a way that in a way that represents the science. Whether you're a politician, whether you're a tradesman, all of these jobs and careers are going to be affected. So I think that's the first really crucial point. In terms of what the jobs of the future might be, we also have to think that whilst this transition will be incredibly painful and maybe up to 80 million jobs may be lost according to the International Labour Organization, there will also be almost up to 100 million new jobs. And that has huge implications for education. That has huge implications for the skills that we need to equip us for those new jobs. So when you're thinking about, well, okay, as a climate activist, what can I do about this? You might start thinking about your own skills and your own career transition to work in these new emerging areas. Or you might think this actually has implications for some campaigns that I really care about. People might need to migrate more to new areas in order to take up these new opportunities. Are those pathways possible for people to move constructively across continents or across countries? And we'll talk a bit more about the importance of this idea of a just transition. So if we just go to the next slide. So it was really good to hear from yourself, Samuel, really emphasizing this idea of what the transition really means, because it's all very well just to say, oh, well, yeah, we've got to bin oil and gas, we've got to bin coal, okay, we've got new renewable energy sources, right, let's go. But we have to think about what that actually implies for the people who work in those areas. And that's why this idea of a just transition to us is really important. And I know in our discussions with after the pandemic is really important for people in Scotland as well, particularly. So just quickly, what is it? A just transition, we think, means getting to net zero, but without leaving people behind. It's that really supportive effort to bring communities and workers that may potentially be stranded by the transition along with us. And that means as industries are phased out and jobs are lost, that those workers are properly compensated or supported and trained into new jobs. So just to give a couple of examples, I was going to mention one in Canada, but since we're actually, since we're supposedly live in Glasgow, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the oil and gas sector in Scotland instead, in fact. So Friends of the Earth Scotland did a report called Offshore, which I really recommend you read if you're interested from the Scottish perspective, where they interviewed 1,383 oil and gas workers who are working off the coast in Scotland. And 81% of them thought about leaving the oil and gas industry to work in another sector. But given the option of retraining to work elsewhere, half of those people will be interested in working in renewables and offshore wind. So what you start to see is that as that sector's changing, oil and gas, we need to change. The people who already work on that in those areas already have many of the skills and in some places the ambition to actually transition to where we want to go, to offshore wind rather than offshore oil and gas. But in terms of skills, we need to support those people and actively compensate them to be able to make that transition. And as a second example, as William mentioned, in South Africa, South Africa has come up with an increasingly ambitious target and has plans to close coal mines. But what about the 80,000 miners who work in South Africa and the families that they support? In many cases, very, very close to the poverty line. If we get rid of coal, what efforts are going to support them? So finally, on the last slide, if that's where we need to go economically and in terms of skills, and even further back in younger people's lives, this has implications for what we learn. This has implications for education. It might mean that we need new skills because new jobs haven't been created yet. It might also mean repurposing old skills, like I mentioned with the oil and gas workers in Scotland. But it might also mean that because we have to change jobs so many times during our long careers, and because new sectors keep emerging, that we actually might have to go back to school more often. We might have to have more shorter degrees and retrain throughout our lives, and in order to top up our skills, rather than necessarily learning all at the beginning of life, only to find that it becomes redundant and completely wasted in 10 years' time. So potentially might have to migrate more, retrain more, and think about lifelong learning. That's my take on jobs and skills. Back to you, William.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to go and just sum up some sort of final thoughts, and then show a little film, and then perhaps open it out for discussion again. I think we need to come back, and this is something you sometimes make to me as a sort of state-registered gloomy person who's a lawyer. You need to have some reasons for optimism, because otherwise it's very demotivating if you get totally demoralized and think we're all going to hell in a basket next Tuesday and there's no way out. I think these are some of the reasons I've got for optimism. Youth movements such as the ones that we've been working with over the year, they are making a difference. They are making inroads. This picture on the top right is Samuel Okori's colleague, Kilo Uchendu, handing over the Global Youth Declaration from COP26 to the United Nations, the President of the United Nations General Assembly this week. I think that's a pretty incredible achievement, and Samuel's been part of it, so hats off to that. Climate science, the main conclusions are now unequivocal. 195 countries endorsed the IPCC report as at the 9th of August this year. And therefore, to some extent, those rather sterile arguments about is climate change real? Is it actually happening? Is it man-made? You know, we've got a little bit beyond that now, because if governments themselves endorse the science, then it really is down to the issue of what they're prepared to do about it. International investment flows amounting to trillions of dollars are being changed by laws, regulations, investor pressure, things like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, making rules to require climate change risk to be reflected in every financial decision, by things like the campaign for the race to zero, which is now extending to almost half of GDP, by the Glasgow Finance Alliance, and so on. And so it really is a question that even if you come up against a government that says it's not going to move, it's not going to do anything, maybe the economics are changing in order to enforce this, and there is progress available that way. That said, there will be setbacks along the road. There will be many instances of governments, even our own, failing to live up to their promises at COP26 and after COP26 is really, in my view, coming down to finding the political will. They know what has to be done. There isn't much dispute about that. So it's really a question of political will. And I think that's sensed from people, from country negotiators to the people on the streets that I saw last night. Whatever the outcome of COP26, while emissions are still rising, it seems to me that you can look at it glass half full or glass half empty, but glass half full is that everyone's talents and everyone's energies are going to be needed. Everyone's skills are relevant, and it all matters, and so on. And I think as a sort of final point, maybe, that there is a need to take people with you. There's a need not just to talk to people that you agree with in the echo chambers of your social media and so on, but I think there's a need to reach out to a wider group of people. It affects everyone, this issue, every region, every country, every life, and every job. But change is going to come when whole societies demand it. And a final couple of reasons for optimism. Climate education, just take one example. Today at 1 o'clock, Jodie Bailey-Ho and Phoebe Hansen, you'll see one of them in the film that's coming up, we're taking a tutorial for the Department of Education and the permanent secretary there on the importance of climate education. And I think that is pretty amazing. On Friday, they will be co-hosting a session at the Blue Zone of COP26 on the importance of climate education for climate ministers. And if that's what young people can do, then the question for us is how can we get behind them and how can we support them? And so at that point, maybe I could just take a pause and show you a short film that we made with our colleagues at Eastside Educational Trust. And what it is 4 young people who are aspiring filmmakers in the East End of London. And they interviewed 4 young climate activists from the UK, from Australia, from Nigeria, and from Kenya. And this is called Using the Law to Fix Climate Change, but it's about more than that, because it's about some of the issues that we've talked about today. So perhaps we can have a look at that and then maybe see if you've got any questions. I'll try that. Oops.
We need to have leaders who can come up with a law which can favor environment, human beings, animals, also can favor the planet. We usually blame most of our leader and also the government because they're the one who are responsible.
Governments have influence over the regulations they put in place to regulate firms and corporations. Taking action and lobbying and emailing your MP is so important so that the people in Parliament and the people with power realise that young people like myself are invested in climate action.
Governments have to care about young people and they have to take into account young people in all future decisions.
We are a force and we are an important stakeholder group. There is more we can do, apart from taking placard and walking to the streets to protest, apart from signing petitions. We can actually take this position of leadership to influence some of these policies, that we want to see happen.
Mock COP is an international virtual youth climate summit. It was to fill the void of climate action. They did regional caucuses and small groups discussing perhaps what policies they wanted to see as an outcome of the 2-week event. They unveiled the COP26 treaty, which now in phase 2 of the campaign are trying to get some of the policies implemented in different countries around the world. For example, in the UK, we have Teach the Future, which is kind of like the main climate education campaign. And what we're hoping is that at COP26, a couple of people from Mock COP or Teach the Future will be able to go and discuss with education ministers on Zoom and then environmental ministers about climate change education, because we think it's obviously very important.
We were reached out to by the firm Equity Generation Lawyers, and they wanted to bring a class action on behalf of all young people around Australia and needed some named litigants. And so they reached out to School Strike for Climate because we were and still are the biggest youth climate movement in Australia. And so from there, we got in touch with lawyers and we've been in touch with them ever since. And so we filed the case Sharma, and that one's through the courts forcing the Environment Minister to not approve coal mines because of her duty of care to young people. It's subject to an appeal, but that if it's held up, that this holds a very strong precedent that can be applied in cases in Australia, but we also hope around the world. Was the first case of its kind. And so that question hadn't been tested in a court of law, at least in Australia. And so the courts just hadn't had to answer the question. Legal litigation, legal activism is a strong way of activism and a strong way of forcing. So if you get the good outcome, you force change.
Africa is not a dumpster. Fossil fuel company, including Shell, they wanted to export the plastic waste material into Kenya. So here in Kenya, we have been able to ban plastic a long time ago. So we were able to tell them clearly why it's very bad for our government of Kenya to accept this plastic. The government were able to state very well that they are not going to accept such a deal.
I found that the Grow to Green movement, we grew to about 6 of my friends, and that was when we decided to develop a theory of how we want to affect change. That was when we decided that we'll be mobilizing the collective power of youth and community to improve climate awareness and climate literacy, because we believe that climate literacy on a very fundamental scale will lead to climate action. 2 years down the line, we have a network of about 700 activists. Drop the concept that these policymakers don't want to act. Make a case for why you want to see them. Make it about action, what we can do, and not what we are not doing. Framing and narrative is very important.
Before you come up with a campaign, you need to come up with a clear message which you can send out to people to understand what you are fighting for.
Get your friends involved, get your family involved, get your school involved, get everyone in your community involved.
Turn urgency into creativity.
It's only through a mass movement of people that we can force change.
Make it about action, what we can do, and not what we are not doing.
Be yourself. Don't be like Greta. So you need to come up with your own way to see how you're going to fight, because we are the future generation and also we are the future leader.
Thank you very much. I think you'll see what I meant. It's not just about the law, it's about everything that those young guys are working for and able to achieve. So that's kind of brought our remarks to a conclusion, and we'll try and just some of the former resources, including the Youth Climate Declaration. Do have a look at that. And kind thanks to many of the organizations that we've had the privilege of working with this year. I'd just like to pause there and see if you've got any reactions to that film or the issues in it, and any questions you'd like to put either to me or to the more expert people like Samuel Wilson, Samuel Okori, Kevin Munsterman, and Ivan Ransom. That's fine, no worries.
Really young people starting from the bottom, in the change, people obviously with no power yet. And I do not feel that there's really a reason for it. I mean, I will always believe in the goodness of people, there's no question. The will of people power over the right people.
Yes, please. Do you want to take the mic and yeah, come and join us?
So I think, so one of the young girls that was in the video, as William said, they were part of Mock COP, and Mock COP went ahead in November 2020 because the young people, although COP itself was postponed because of the pandemic, the young people decided that, they didn't have time to wait. And so they went ahead and did Mock COP. They did it all on Zoom, and they came up with their treaty, which COP26 and beyond helped them with the, to actually write into a legal text. And then they presented that to policymakers. And as William said, they're now they're going to be in the blue zone. They're having this opportunity to present Teach the Future to environment ministers and education ministers. So it works. They have made that happen. They've had some support, and that's why COP26 and beyond are doing what they're doing. It's why after the pandemic's doing what we're doing. We're kind of trying to create the space where we're creating the support networks, but really it's their, you know, it's their work and it's their passion and their commitment. But I think that's an example of how, you know, it is actually working. So I know it can be difficult. It definitely is difficult to maintain that optimism. But that to me sums up why it is all worth it. And why it's important for us that are maybe feel a little bit more jaded to keep that optimism there, because, you know, they've made that happen. And they need to keep bringing people along with them in order to keep pushing that further and actually try and get these things into policy. What to say?
Thanks very much indeed. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I was asked to address the question at an event this morning on how do you empower young people to address climate change? And I thought actually it was a two-way street. It wasn't just sort of, you know, old geezers like myself saying, how do I empower young people? It's not as if I can teach Greta Thunberg how to become an effective activist. All you can do is to look for the bits and pieces where you can add some skills or some know-how about a particular area and say, well, look, this is what I would like to contribute in order to make this work. I mean, why we set up COP26 and beyond is we got fed up with people sitting back and saying, well, all right, they'll sort out the climate. They can go on strike on Fridays. They can go and make the street protests and we don't have to do anything. And we just thought, well, we must know something about something and we ought to be able to contribute what we do know in support of that effort. And so it's just like a relay race, isn't it? You just take the issue as far as you can and then you hand it over to someone else and say, well, I've now run out of steam on this particular issue. You take it on, but that's what we're trying to do, and it seems so much like what after the pandemic is trying to do, and in a more effective way. But that's our aim. That's our aim.
Yeah, I completely agree with the fact that there are lots of reasons to be optimistic. Basic nature of humankind is a reason to be. But a reason for me that I don't feel convinced is that what I saw in the last video is that we were somehow trying to work within the system to get change around. And then I think, okay, we have known about climate change for 126 years. The scientists told us that it was going to happen, and the politicians that we elected didn't seem to care. I see not yet, but I see really young people, 18, 20, and we seem to rely on them. Greta, you do it, please. No, Greta says, no, you do it. I'm here to tell you to do it. It seems to me that game is not running the right way. As I heard one of those young people say, we're going to sue government for their duty of care, and it'll be the first one in the world. Well, no, it will be 4 in the world. The first 3 were all 3 in the Netherlands where I come from. We won 3 times, doesn't matter, it didn't change.
Yeah, you're right, and it's the same with, I mean, that guy Tom Webster Arbisu, they have made a complete landmark case, the Sharma case, because there were 8 young climate activists and an 86-year-old nun who was their legal guardian. And the case was brought by Equity Generation lawyers, and it established a completely new right in Australian law, a duty on the minister to stop and think about the health impacts on young people before she authorized the coal mine extension. So in legal terms, it was a complete breakthrough and established new principle. But in practical terms, you're right, because the minister is going to appeal against that. So she's presumably going to argue that there is no duty on her to stop and think about the healthy young people before she authorizes coal mine extensions, despite having not challenged the climate evidence and despite 154 pages of closely reasoned judgment from the judge. And she's authorized the coal mine extension anyway. So that's how it goes. But I don't think that means they didn't achieve anything. I think they achieved a whole lot. like your Netherlands cases and Milieu Défense and so on, it doesn't all change next Tuesday, but it doesn't mean that nothing has been achieved. I really believe that.
Well, and again, I completely agree. It does seem to me that we working on sustainability issues, not dressed like this, but for a quarter of a century. And what I see is one step forward, two steps back on a number of sustainability issues. And climate change is just one. So I really feel that we need more systemic change, and the way what I saw in the video is they were going to do it with lawmakers, etc., within the system. And I'm afraid that if we don't tweak the system, that it's, for instance, less vulnerable for money influencing which politician gets to get the final vote. I mean, here in the UK, I think it's crazy that only 14 million people voted for the Conservatives, and yet they get all the power. That is not a democracy, in my opinion. And if you don't change that around, then it's always going to be one step forward or two steps backwards.
Yes, just a little bit. So I kind of.
Do you want to come and speak here? Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for that.
I am an optimist.
Yeah, no, so am I. but I'm very sensitive to that point, because I sometimes journey through pessimism back to optimism. But what I see is that we're to an extent it's baked in, because none of those people are voting yet, right? And it's almost exactly what you said. Unless there's any jeopardy for the policy making and governmental organizational that can act at scale, that are supposed to be acting right now over the river, down by the river, to change, they won't, right? So, but what I see is there's a degree of adaptation and mitigation that generation, those generations is baked in for them. They are confronting it. So the awareness and flexibility and robustness that they have as individuals, even if things continue to go badly and end up bad, or not. There's a period of time in which there's several generations before we start to reverse and address what we need to. I see I feel a lot of confidence in them because their awareness and the nuance in which they understand the environment around them, how the environment works, and their move away from extractivism and kind of mindless accumulation of goods and services, and is reassuring to me. It's just unfortunate that the pessimistic bit is that there's probably going to be in a bad state by the time they're in a position to change it. So yeah, I kind of sensitive to that point, but I think it swings both ways. I think they're both reason for pessimism and optimism when watching them, I think.
Are there any more questions or comments from the representatives of that generation that are in the room? Rachel, come on.
No, I was just going to say, because obviously young people have such a strong voice when happening on this thing. All the projects that we have going on, there's some amazing ideas, but obviously we're not in the ages, you might not have all the knowledge all the time. So it's a collaborative effort between our generation, older generations, the younger generations, and to like make all this happen. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen just by sitting down at a table with one person from each generation and it's all fixed. It's going to take years and years. And as Fergus says, like it might be years before we are in a position to change that. So we need to kind of stop the damage now, or let people know that this is the target points that we need to focus on now, so that when we do come into power, that it's easier for us to get the traction.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then no, I think what I've learned this year is a complete revaluation of sorry whatever this sounds like, but a complete revaluation of what young people are capable of. And just sort of sitting back saying, whoa, you know, I look at what they're doing. I look at what people like Samuel and Kevin and Ivan and all these others and these people in Mock COP and have just reevaluated what young people are capable of. And therefore, I think lots of things have got to change. I mean, for example, I quite believe in parliamentary democracy, but it needs refreshing and it needs reinvigorating, and it should be adapting to bring those people in. If you don't want them protesting in the streets, you should open up the system and make it accessible to young people and new ideas and to the concerns that they have, and show how to make it work. And that's part of what we're doing. It's part of what we're trying to do is to say, okay, us establishment types have got to sort of respond to the concerns that are being expressed here. What are we doing about that? So we're trying to sort of show some ways that you can do some things. Yeah, you said, can you speak up?
Idea, but it really resonates with one of the last episodes.
Okay.
As I look on the screen, I don't see like an information logo of a big university, for example. Where's the role of the university as change makers? Because we're living in a time of universitification, like universities, cities, things grow together. In Germany, especially where I come from, they really get into the subject, what is city, how do we develop, how are we sustainable, and cities understand the power of universities and this process. I don't have to tell you about it. So, on the other hand, is if you say we have to get in touch with the democracy and the structures and all this stuff, even universities in this responsibility, because they educate on the last important steps, these people who say, this is what I learned, this is how we do. So we are really trying to focus on that.
Yeah, it's ironic what you say, because yes, I think the question is sort of, where are universities in this, and where's the evidence that universities are taking some of this action? Is that correct? And I say my response to that is it's slightly ironic, because we did talk to a number of universities before we set up COP26 and beyond, and tried to get a collaborative effort, but it's quite difficult to get universities to act. Although, to be fair to them, I think there is a COP26 universities network, which I'm sure is doing all sorts of incredible work, and some of the individual universities have fantastic programs like the Cambridge Net Zero program, and some of the, well, Strathclyde University is not doing too badly, and of course many others, and so on. So that there is that work going on. I'd like to see more of it. And I know that the colleagues and friends that we're dealing with, and students organizing for sustainability and Teach the Future, that they're on to the universities to try and make them update their courses, make them more accessible, make them more up to date and relevant, and to try and relate it to the specific concerns that young activists are expressing to them. So they are very much on that. If that's your concern, I think if I put you in touch with them, they would be more up to date than me. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'll just again, just to kind of come in on that point again. Obviously, we're in a university. We're more specifically, we're in the union of Strathclyde University, and I think the fact that we are here in this space, and there's lots of different people, and the reception that we've had and the openness and the collaboration has been incredible. And it's not just about these 2 weeks. We've formed relationships that will persist, and that's part of what this particular event is about the legacy. What do we want to see? And what we want to see is that all these relationships that we've made, we take forward, and we affect change over the years to come. And we talk to the hosts of future COPs about what we did here in Glasgow, and we make the whole process much more about involving civil society and all kind of levels of society. But I know that we, after the pandemic, COP26 and beyond, Strathclyde Union, Strathclyde University, we will all continue to work together for as long as it takes, and that's basically forever. And Napier University as well. It's and it can be difficult in the higher education sector, but I think the example of what we've done here, we've got all these students and academics from Napier who are within Strathclyde, and we're like running all these events, and you know, we've also had connections with Glasgow, we've had connections with Durham, we've had connections with universities all over the place. And so hope, you know, I really do hope that, you know, that one of the most kind of enduring things that we've done is just prove that when you bring people together from different walks of life who don't normally work together, that you open up a space and you open up all these ideas and you do push things forward in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Because my own background is in construction in the built environment, and I will be taking a huge amount of learning back into that industry with me. Things that, you know, I know people just don't do because they're just so used to talking to each other. And that as soon as you kind of come away and then you start seeing how people present ideas from a design thinking point of view, and, you know, you're like, oh my goodness, the power of the storytelling, all of those things, so important. And it, you know, I think one person just opening their eyes to that and then going back and saying, look, there's another way to do this. Let's have a look. We proved it. We proved it here. And that's what this kind of 2 weeks is all about for us. So, so I would just like to say thanks to William and to Sam and Samuel and Kevin and Ivan for joining us today, and for showing us the amazing video, and hopefully you can give us a copy and we can put it on the screens outside. And to everybody for coming. And I think we need to wrap up now because our next event will be kind of starting soon. So thanks very much, William.
Thank you very much indeed from all of us, and thanks to Kevin and Ivan and Samuel as well. Many thanks. Bye.
That was going on. We got on.
But yeah, we were.
You were closing the webinar. You were live streaming it.